How did Iran hit Kuwait's airport with multiple ballistic missiles despite having a Patriot defense system? For context, Kuwait International Airport (KWI) sits just 150 miles, about 240 kilometers from the nearest Iranian coastline. This proximity makes it one of the most accessible targets for a strike against a U.S. ally in the region. Because the American-operated Ali Al Salem Air Base is so heavily fortified with Patriot missiles, a civilian airport presents a much softer, easier target. However, even a softer target has defenses, meaning an attacker still has to launch weapons in massive volumes to ensure a successful strike. To do this, Iranian forces fired more than 30 Fateh ballistic missiles, accompanied by a swarm of Shahed kamikaze drones. This saturation strategy worked perfectly against the less defended airport. By flooding the airspace with multiple threats at once, they overwhelmed the limited number of Patriot batteries stationed there. The defense systems managed to intercept many of the incoming missiles, but that is the brutal reality of a saturation attack. If even just 4 ballistic missiles slip through the net, the devastation upon impact is catastrophic. But Iran's military response was explicitly framed as an act of retaliation. According to Iran, the counterattack was a response when U.S. strike 2 strategic IRGC strongholds, Qashm Island, the heavily fortified choke point managing maritime traffic, and Goruk, a critical coastal staging ground for electronic warfare and drone operations. But what makes Qashm Island such a high-priority target in this theater? The answer lies in its geography. As the largest island in the Persian Gulf, it acts as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, allowing the IRGC to position coastal defense cruise missiles and radar arrays right at the throat of global shipping lanes. But Iran also launched dozens of one-way drones at the U.S. Navy, and my colleague will explain how U.S. will counter these deadly Shahed drones.
Well, to pull off a mission like this, the U.S. relies on a mixed force of carrier-based aircraft and guided missile destroyers. The chaos began when radar screens in the U.S. command centers suddenly lit up. Deadly one-way attack drones were flying in fast, tracking straight toward a ship. The U.S. had to launch a counterattack immediately. But how do you stop these drone swarms from attacking permanently? They had to trace the attack back to its source, the port city. This time, the weapon of choice was the Tomahawk cruise missile. Launched from warships out at sea, they slammed into the Iranian launch site, hitting them incredibly hard. But what was the Iranian response? Since they couldn't target the mobile U.S. warships out on the open water, they chose a stationary target instead, a U.S. airbase in Kuwait. And that's when all hell broke loose. In the pitch-black early hours of May 28, 2026, the fragile ceasefire in the Persian Gulf was pushed to the breaking point. A sudden alarm blared across the combat information centers of U.S. warships. 4 Iranian one-way attack drones were airborne, tracking at low altitudes over the waves toward commercial shipping. But as the fleet tracked the skies, a far more critical countdown was happening on the ground. Deep within a compound near the strategic port of Bandar Abbas, a 5th drone was being fueled and prepped on its launch rail. It had less than 15 minutes until ignition. So how did U.S. Central Command track this swarm in the dark? And what precision weapon was used to obliterate the ground control station and drone launchers before that 5th drone could ever leave the rail? For that, we have to look at Part 2, the layered air defense and the aerial intercept. The moment the threat materialized, the U.S. military's layered defense net went live. When dealing with a swarm of low-altitude loitering munitions, specifically showed series one-way attack drones, seconds matter. These drones are mass-produced and designed to slip beneath standard radar coverage. While heavy land-based strike fighters like the F-15 provide massive firepower from regional bases, they do not operate from aircraft carriers. Instead, the immediate aerial response falls to the carrier strike group's forward-deployed FA-18 Super Hornets. Vectoring in at high speed, the Super Hornets locked onto the incoming signatures. Using AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles, highly agile, infrared tracking weapons, the fighters locked onto the heat signatures of the drone's small piston engines. Within minutes, the airborne drones were blasted out of the sky over open water.